I can finally check cosplaying Miku off my bucket list, but not without struggle. So many things went wrong with this cosplay, but hey, it's done, and let's go through how I did it. Hi, I'm Blue, the cosplayer known as Blue Clarice, and today we are making Punk Miku. This is not a commonly known Miku, but I really liked it and had a bunch of faux leather, so I decided to make it. Anyways, I started with the boot covers, which was a mistake. I did the duct tape method, which is basically where you wrap your leg with plastic wrap and then you cover it with duct tape. A lot of armor builders and people who make skin tight clothing use this method. I have never done this before, and how it goes, I may never do it again. Once my leg was covered with duct tape, I marked where all of the seams would go with a Sharpie. This way I could just easily cut everything apart. And once I had the duct tape pattern, I wanted it to be flat, so I used this random paper I have, and yes, that is someone's math homework on it. I don't know who, but whatever, it's turning into a pattern right now. And I cut out all the little individual pieces. Now I'm cutting it out of the fabric. Yeah, the fabric. Once I pinned all the patterns to the fabric and cut it out, it was time to start sewing. I started with the heel of the shoe just because the area was small and it was one of the most tricky parts to sew. But getting to the larger boot part was pretty straightforward. You just want to use a slight zigzag stitch just to make room for stretch. I'm not going to tell you if I did that or not though. But regardless, this is where the first big, not even my mistake on my part, the first challenge of this cosplay came in. Just look at this. Look at this. The fabric is horrible. The top layer literally just ripped off the freaking bone. And I was so upset because this actually took me a really long time to do and to sew. And I was questioning if I even wanted to continue this cosplay because that was a mess. But I had already spent all this time making this really cool pattern, so I decided to not give up and I switched to a different aspect of this cosplay, the skirt. Whenever I'm making a new piece of clothing, I like to look at something I have that's similar. It helps me figure out how things work. For this, I'm going to use a strip of fabric and then a few more strips of fabric to make the waistband. And yes, I am making this out of faux leather. I don't know why I did this to me, but I gotta say, this pleather was easier to sew than some of the pleather I've used. In case you're interested in using this fabric, I got the pleather from Big Z Fabrics, which I would recommend checking out. They did not sponsor this video, but they have sponsored me in the past. As you can see, I do not have proper sewing clips, so I'm using the most ridiculous things possible to clip my fabric. So here I'm just trimming the edge of the brown part because I just don't want it to be seen at all. This is probably unnecessary, but sometimes I do unnecessary things. And I managed to have a pretty clean hem, so I was satisfied with that. Next, I decided to measure how big I wanted the pleats to be, and I basically copied that with my fabric. Next, we're going to do something that I do pretty regularly on this channel, and that is baste the fabric. I don't think I've really stressed the importance of this, but it holds your fabric into place, which is super useful. With that finish, it's time for the waistband, and after cutting out several strips of fabric, I sewed them together, and now I'm going to understitch instead of top stitching. It's just too thick to top stitch. The understitching gives a really nice clean effect, as you can see right here. Now the skirt is almost complete. We just gotta do a few finishing touches and sew in the zipper, which I did not record because that was actually hard because I did a lap zipper in pleather. Wouldn't recommend, but it does make the skirt a lot easier to get into. Now we're back on that duct tape pattern grind. I made a duct tape pattern for the crop top part and I couldn't show you that for obvious reasons. Anyways, I'm just cleaning up a bit and then I'm marking all of the different pieces. Oh gosh, this is about to be my mortal enemy, boob cups. I struggled through boob cups with my oyster dress and I'm about to struggle again, but not as bad because they're actually not as as hard as I thought, at least the second time around. So let's go. Oh wow, I forgot another mortal enemy of mine. I am actually making a mock-up. Can you believe it? Yeah, I just don't have a lot of the pleather fabric and I don't want to ruin it. So I am making a mock-up. I needed a way to get into this shirt, so I turned back to a fabric you might recognize. Yes, this is the fabric I used for the boot covers. And yes, the whole top layer came off. This, while terrible, kind of worked in my favor because I could use the bottom stretch part to make the crisscross stretch patterns on the side of Miku's crop top. My idea was that this would stretch enough to allow me to fit this over my head. Putting this together is somewhat tedious because you have to completely hand sew it, or at least I did. And when I finished, I was able to neatly sew it into the mock-up. Because of the fabric I used for the mock-up, there's more give in that fabric than there is for pleather. So the stretch was a lot less and it was more difficult to put on, but not too bad. So I was super chaotic with this cosplay and I skipped to working on the headset. I bought some cheap headset from 5 and Below and decided to paint it a bit to match how it looks in the picture. And then I'm going to use foam clay to create the spikes and the horns. I wanted to give them an organic look. So I started by molding them out of tinfoil so that I could just cover it with foam clay. I bet you thought we were going to paint next, but no, we're going to start on the wig because I am just pure chaos with this cosplay. So y'all requested I talk a bit more about how I make my wigs. And this is one of the ways I do it. I use the crochet method. So I get a wig cap and then I use a crochet hook, which is different from the crochet hook you would use for like crocheting a garment. So I found these really nice pre-made locks that were blue. The color's a bit off from Miku's hair, but I honestly thought that was fine for the punk version. Basically, what I'm doing here is I'm pulling the locks through the holes in the wig cap and I'm making a knot there. This itself is not that challenging. The hardest part about this is covering the whole head accurately, especially since I'm doing pigtails, and also trying to make the front look somewhat natural. Most time I'm doing my wigs, I will create my own twists or create my own braids or my own locks because I have a lot more freedom in that and I can make it look more organic and real. But I didn't really think that was necessary for this cosplay, so I didn't do it. This is how the wig is looking and I'm actually pretty happy with it. I didn't think it was gonna come out this good, but I'm glad it did because I don't have time to do anything else. Now we paint. And I am using Mod Podge to seal my foam because yes, armor builders out there, you know who I'm talking to. I am actually trying to do things the proper way. And then we'll just paint the horns with black and we will paint the little spikes with silver. I'm not gonna lie, this wig came out like 10 times better than I thought. And at this point, I was starting to get pretty excited about this cosplay. I hope you did not forget about the shirt because now I am ripping apart the mock-up so that I can finally cut this out of my pleather. And here are all the cutout pieces for the top, including the lining. And as you can see, there's my suitcase because I did go on a trip. This next part is me on the airplane starting the armbands. I decided to crochet because you can transport that easily. So we're gonna fast forward to when I got home. As you can see, most of the armband was already done and I'm just finishing up some loose ends here. I'll try to explain it, but I'm not the best at crochet. I'm getting better because I do have a big crochet plan coming up at some point, hopefully in the future. But anyways, I just used chain stitch and then kind of just made a bunch of triangles and just used more chain stitch. I'm so sorry if this is confusing because now we're going back to the top and I'm sewing the lining first before sewing the actual pleather. And then there's more basting, which I'm glossing over this, but this took a while, before sewing everything in. And now it's time to apply some of the studs. And this, we'll get into it. Applying studs isn't necessarily hard, but it's very tedious. This is literally taking forever. I'm not even done one side. I can't tell if it looks bad or good. Yeah, I might have been losing it. The most important tool when you're applying studs is an awl. You want to poke holes through your fabric and then fold the little legs over the fabric. Once all the studs were applied, I could finally fully assemble the shirt, and this is where it was a bit tricky because I was adding in the weird crisscross stretch thing we made earlier. With the shirt mostly done, we have to get back to the crochet. And now I'm applying spikes again. These are a little different because you screw them into your fabric, or in this case your yarn, and these are way easier to apply. I decided to just crochet the fishnet on the shirt, which is the same stitch as I did for the armband. And it is foam time, the part that scares me the most about this cosplay. So I'm modeling the guitar after a real guitar I just happen to have. It's super dusty. Anyways, I am just cutting the pattern out of foam. So I'm not only using a long wooden pole to go through the guitar, I'm also going to be stiffening up the foam with some cardboard. Now, I'm not showing this next part on camera because I have to wear a mask and go into a well-ventilated area, but I basically glued everything together. I also added in some styrofoam just to help the guitar keep its shape. Now, the one part I didn't make of the pattern was the sides, so I actually just cut it out of a much thinner foam that's way easier to cut, and then glued it all along the sides. Then comes cleaning up the edges and sanding. You're gonna be sanding a lot. I still don't even think I sanded enough, but it is what it is. Next, I'm using Quick Seal for the first time. I realized that I did not use enough, and my main issue was because it was hard to squeeze it out. So guitar has all these little details that I think are really fun, and I didn't want to sculpt them because I wanted it to look more perfect than like organic, so I used wood and beads. So there was a lot of wood cutting and, you guessed it, sanding. Now that I had all the little pieces prepared, it was time to glue them to the guitar, which, might I say, was looking pretty decent. To make sure I was putting all the details in the right places, I just compared it to the guitar I used for the pattern, and I glued everything on. So this part, there's just a lot of measuring, marking things down, and it took a bit of time, but it wasn't too bad. Yeah, so I'm sure y'all know the title is This Was Harder Than You Think. And the thing about it is, I'm sure some people think plasti dipping is easy. It's not the worst, but it sucks when you run out and you have no motivation to go get some more. So yeah, I just used what I had and then called it a day. I finished spray painting the guitar and I learned that I do not enjoy spray painting. No, just give me a brush and some acrylic paint and I'm good. And that is exactly what I did. The guitar has a black stripe going along the side, so I did that. Ooh, we're finally on a fun but challenging part. So I'm no artist in the drawing sense. I didn't want to exactly freehand on the guitar I just spent hours making, so I sketched it out, the design first. The idea behind this was to make a skull that looked like Miku and to use leeks as the crossbones because, that's her favorite food. As you can see, I am freehanding it on the guitar, following the image I drew. I was kind of scared it wouldn't work out, but I think it was okay because I was trying to give it a scratchy punk rock feel, and it came out pretty successful. So with all of that done, there is still one or two details I need to add, and that is the strings. I had some leftover soldering wire from a project I did a while ago and decided to use that as the strings on the guitar. And wow, you can see a sneak peek of everything here. I was working on this cosplay for a while because I kept stopping and losing motivation, but seeing it all together in this moment was getting me pretty excited, but not excited enough to be ready for the last thing I had to do. We have to go back to the boots, y'all. Thankfully, I got some new, not crappy fabric. We are using the same pattern as last time, so I'm going to skip all that cutting and sewing and go straight to the soles. So when making boot covers, you need something on the bottom of the shoe to make sure you're not slipping around. And I wanted to make mine kind of special, so I was going to cut the same shape of the design I drew on the car out of the soles. This was a little tricky, but I actually think it came out pretty nice. Once I had that done, I wanted to sew the silver bottom part of the shoe to the top black part of the shoe. With the boots mostly done, I am going to move on to the belts. I've already talked about how this was a challenging cosplay for me, but I originally did the belts wrong. I tried to sew 2 strips of the black fabric together and then shove a piece of foam between them. That didn't work out that well, so I used a method where I cut out several strips of foam and then I glued the fabric to the top of the foam. And then I'm going to sew around the edge to make it look more like a realistic belt. One thing I had a lot of trouble with was sewing the circular edge of the belt. So instead of using a machine, I just hand stitched it because it looks a lot neater and I have a lot more control. Next, I got out my hammer and it was time to properly apply the silver rivets. I actually haven't done this before. Seriously, this was so much hammering, and you might recognize this belt loop from one of my other cosplays. Yes, I did repurpose this from my Nightwatch cosplay, but we always gotta repurpose, reuse cosplay pieces and things we already have because we want to keep our cosplays as sustainable as possible. With the belts finished, I literally had to run to con. And this is the first time I went to con without having a cosplay completely finished, but I already had postponed this project enough, so I just went for it. I was even crocheting and sewing last minute in the hotel, but I managed to finish it, and here is the finished piece. Even with all the struggle, I really came through with a cosplay that I could love. I like trying new things with cosplay, learning new skills, and that's not something I plan to change anytime soon. The guitar came out great. The overall appearance of the cosplay is cool. Like always, there's going to be some things I would love to change, but dang, I look cute as heck. And I can finally cross cosplaying Miku off my cosplay bucket list.